Scott. So as a rule, when it comes to inflating king airways, LMAs, or endotracheal tubes, we simply way overinflate. And the rationale is simple, and that's especially with endo tubes. Many of y'all remember, like me, the way we were taught that we had enough pressure was simply we felt the cuff. And you gave it a little squeeze, and it was utterly subjective, but you said, you know what, yeah, that feels like it's probably the right amount of pressure. However, for several years in ICU, more recently in ER and on transport, when they've actually looked at the amount of pressure in the cuff, again, we way overinflate cuffs, and that's a big deal. The rationale is that if the pressure inside of this cuff is way too high, remember what it's squishing, it's called the trachea. And that's important because when it comes to heart attacks, remember that time is muscle. And when it comes to the inside of your trachea, time is tissue. And the longer this thing stays overinflated, the higher chance you have of literally killing the tracheal tissue. So with that, the way that we know whether it's a kid or an adult what the pressure is just like taking a blood pressure. If you're taking a blood pressure, you can feel the wrist and say, yeah, it feels like it's probably good. Or you can actually take a blood pressure. And the same idea applies with various manufacturers with these handheld devices. And they work again for kings, they work for LMAs, and they work for endo tubes. They hook onto the pilot balloon, meaning where you inflate. And as soon as you hook it up, that's important because I thought this felt good. But when you looked right here, it's actually a pressure of 95, which is 70 millimeters of mercury higher than what it should be. That's huge. So if indeed it's way too high, all you have to do with these various devices is on the side, simply push the button. And you just gently let a little bit of air out until it drops down to the level that you want. And exactly the same idea applies when it comes to a seriously overinflated king airway. If I were to place this in and hook it up to exactly the same spot, I'd see that the pressure is way too high. So therefore, all I have to do is just slowly let it come back down. And on this device, it specifically says King LT, or the King airway. But remember, exactly the same pressures that work for king airways work for LMAs as well. So, moral of the story, whether it's a king airway, an LMA, or a baby to an adult endotracheal tube, as a rule, we way overinflate our cuffs. So now, not only in the ICU, but into the ER and transport as well. If you've got a cuff of any sort that's inflated, you really ought to see what the pressure actually is.